Give me a minute. I need to collect myself. Okay. No. You're going to make me laugh.
Okay. Okay, I won't look at you or something.
Okay. Don't look at me or smile at me or anything.
Okay,
I'll take these off.
Let me zip this up because you won't be able to see my mouth.
This couch is hard. I feel like I'm falling off. Okay. Should I read the title?
Okay.
Maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
Alright. Go ahead.
Okay.
The Trespassers. Are you guys heading out? A staticky voice sounded through the small battered walkie-talkie. Gabe glanced at me and I nodded. Affirmative, he responded, the device pressed against his mouth. It was another hot, sticky spring Saturday in the forest of our neighborhood. On those typical weekend hours, Abby and Gabe, my siblings, and I were notorious for occupying ourselves in our backyard woods that lay beyond our fenced-in yard. Often, our neighborhood friends, the Yardleys and Randolphs, would join us on our little expeditions. Only a few times had we dared step outside of the property line, marked by faded orange flags. The trouble was, a quarter of an acre of the woods can only be explored so many times. We were tired of the familiarity. Then, on that fateful afternoon, the possibility of real adventure beckoned us, like a laser pointer tempts a kitten. Somehow, a brilliant, problem-solving idea was suggested, and after much deliberation and conversation over walkie-talkies, the gang of kids finalized a simple, yet thrillingly risky plan to cure us of our restlessness. Abby, Gabe, and I would leave our own property and trek through the woods that were owned but never used by our neighbors until we reached the Randolphs' backyard. The Yardley kids would do the same from their house and meet us there, since that was the middle point, and the Randolph kids would be ready to go when we all arrived. Then, together, we would continue the journey up to the Yardleys' property at the top of the street. I, being the oldest and most responsible one, of course, asked permission from my dad to carry out this plan. Being clever, I tried to make the whole thing sound less like hiking through a bunch of people's backyards and more like meeting up with our friends in the woods. It didn't matter anyway, because he must have been pretty distracted considering that he said we could do it, and Mom wasn't home to intervene. As a safety precaution, I decided to leash up Hershey, our dog, so he could come with us, just in case. So there we were, 3 kids and a big fluffy dog, making our way out of the yard and into the mysterious wilderness ahead. After a few minutes of hiking, the familiar terrain changed from open forest to dense brush. I was in the lead with Hershey, and Gabe and Abby followed close behind. As we reached our first challenge, I turned to them. Do you think we can do it? They shrugged, and we entered the sea of thorns, snarled and jungly. After quite a few scratches and faces full of cobweb, we managed to make it through alive. By this time, we were sweating profusely and complaining to each other about how exhausted we were. Nonetheless, we pressed forward. Our friends were counting on us to make it to the next stop. As I silently groaned about untangling the dog leash for the 15th time, a distant shout broke my whining thoughts. Hey, kids! Never seen you playing out here before. I froze and looked back to see my siblings' large eyes grow even larger. I waved like any nice, ordinary, non-trespassing child would, and led my party in a beeline out of the spectators' sight. That was close, Abby panted, once we reached a safe distance. Soon, we had reached the overgrown, grassy yard of the Randolphs. Gabe tugged the walkie-talkie off of his waistline and off the elastic waistline of his shorts and put it to his lips. We are at our first stop, copy. The Wolfslegels are at the first stop. Briefly afterwards, our little friends came thundering down towards us in their boots and other gear. Hershey whined and licked their sweaty palms once they got close enough. "Hi guys," one of them said. "Where are the Yardleys?" "They aren't here yet," I replied, "but that's okay. We can just keep going until we meet up with them." All 5 kids thought this was a fine plan, so we proceeded. The next yard can be dangerous, I reminded myself as we grew closer. That yard belonged to the kind of neighbors the parents whisper about and keep their children away from. Conversations of those people were the ones that always ceased abruptly whenever I came within earshot. I had concluded that those were just bad, dangerous people who might shoot you or something like they do in the movies. That yard also backed up to a fairly busy road, leaving only a sparse stretch of forest in between. Not much cover, I observed. Our group crossed the boundary and came into view of the old, dilapidated house. Not far from us, an above-ground pool sagged in its deck, looking more like a mosquito farm than a human swimming pit. We were halfway through their neck of the woods when I glanced at the sad, neglected property just in time to see, wait, is that no, it can't be. A man tanning on the deck? I stopped in my tracks and played 100 thoughts through my head. Oh no, he's one of them. What if he sees us or hears us? He's gonna get his gun out and shoot us. How are we supposed to get out of here without being noticed? I'm in so much trouble. I was Odysseus, and I had just led my men into a situation of most certain death. I whirled around to the other kids and pointed out the threat that lay so close to us, a great predator napping in the sun. Then, my finger pressed against my lips. I glared at each of them so they wouldn't dare peep. Abby, Gabe, and the other kids froze like deer in the headlights when they realized what was wrong. Even Hershey stopped sniffing and stood quietly. Suddenly, a walkie-talkie blared, piercing the quiet, causing us to wince as Gabe swiftly muted it. All this panic engrossed my attention, and I didn't even notice the sound of footsteps, snapping branches, and crunching leaves as they approached me. A Randolph kid waved at me to get my attention and motioned to something behind me. I spun around and saw the Yardley kids, about to shout a greeting in our direction. They were completely unaware of the dangerous situation we were in. "Hey," I hissed, attempting to get the 4 of them to look at me. Gesturing towards the man on the deck, I put my finger to my mouth again. Slowly, I began to crouch down, hoping to hide slightly better, while the others followed my lead. Just when I thought about trying to crawl out of sight, the sound of a chair scraping against wood turned my head. A predator, unaware of the prey so nearby, was rising from his rest. We all squatted in silence, watching him slowly make his way towards the house. With heavy, intimidating treads, he climbed the stairs up to the porch and hung a towel on the railing. Opening the door, the man began to step inside, but stopped halfway through the rusty threshold. His shirtless, pale body suddenly turned in our direction, causing my heart to stop. Realizing that he had only forgotten his beer on the porch, I watched as he picked it up and carried it back inside. Once the man was safely in the house, we breathed for the first time in several minutes, and all 10 kids, plus the dog, quickly scampered out of the yard. The rest of the journey was a breeze, and before we knew it, we were slipping through the Yardleys' high boarded fence into the cleared green lawn that promised much more safety than the woods, so wide and vast. We couldn't stay there though, because Hershey was not very appreciative of being tied up outside of someone else's house when he just wanted AC and water. It was time to go home, and this time, Abby, Gabe, Hershey, and I agreed to walk down the road instead. As the late afternoon sun shone down on our sweaty heads, we marched towards our house wearily, unsure if the excitement that day was worth the price of the struggle we had faced. Even though our trials seemed to be over, I wasn't convinced we would get away with our recklessness altogether. Anxiety nagged at me as I mentally filed all the possibilities of punishment we could face from our parents. I had known that our journey probably wasn't the wisest or most holy way to deal with boredom, but I was starting to regret the whole escapade. At least we were almost home, where safety trumped potential consequences any day in my young mind. When we got back, Mom was there, and I cautiously told her about our quite terrifying adventure. She was not too pleased with what we had accomplished, and Dad said he had no idea about any of it. That's called trespassing, Mom informed us sternly, and it's illegal. We didn't know it was that bad, I pleaded. Abby gasped. Will we get arrested? My mom sighed. No, just never go on other people's property without their permission again. And we didn't, for the most part.